I think just be there. Like, be there, you know, like it means a lot to your kids when you just show up.
What's going on, everybody? Eddy and Jon Finkel here for the Life of Dad show. And on the line, we're very happy to have this guest. He's really cool. You should check out his podcast, The Sporkful. Of course, it's none other than Dan Pashman. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us, Dan. How you doing, man?
Hey, good. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
We are excited to have you on. I'm personally excited to have you on. We go way back with our mutual best buddy, Eddie Koblenz, back in New Jersey. And for people who don't know, I just want to kind of read off how you've made an amazing career from loving food. You're the creator of the award-nominated, award-winning podcast, The Sporkful. You also have a book, which I keep around because it's one of my favorites to kind of flip through when I have just a few minutes, which is Eat More Better, and it's called How to Make Every Bite More Delicious. And you do the show called You're Eating It Wrong. And it's fantastic for me personally to see how you've kind of blossomed from, I remember just hearing like, hey, you know, through the grapevine of our high school, like Dan's doing this show on food, to now you've become like this renowned food expert. So I wanted to ask you, because we had many meals together at Eddie's house and a variety of things, and I never knew you had this amazing talent and knowledge inside of you. So when did you know that stuff?
Well, thanks for that intro, John. And yeah, I mean, I don't know that. I always knew that I really loved to eat. That may be my greatest talent. I definitely remember dinners at Eddie's house. He had his mom made these hot dogs, and I told my mom, Mrs. Koblenz has the best hot dogs. Like, what's going on with those hot dogs? We need hot dogs like that. So she called Mrs. Koblenz, and it turns out they were turkey dogs. But they have a certain flavor. And then there was always a recurring joke that in our house that Mrs. Koblenz made cupcakes, and my mom never made cupcakes. And I was like, how come you never make cupcakes like Mrs. Koblenz? So when I got married, Mrs. Koblenz actually gave me a set of cupcake making tins and like a display glass and everything, which is kind of a perfect gift. So look, I always loved to eat. I would always I was the kid who would like come back from the dinner at someone else's house and be like, they serve this and that, and I noticed this. Like, I love the hot dogs or whatever. So that was certainly something I was always into, but I never really. It wasn't until I was probably in my 20s that I kind of put together, you know, the idea that I had this sort of obsessive, hyper detailed approach to everything in life, and that I was especially strong in food, and that could actually be like a job, right. You know. Like, it took a while for me to realize, like, so, like, I don't just have to be the weird guy at the diner who's, like, taking apart his food and putting it back together because he has so many opinions about these things. Like, this could be my job? Wow.
And what was the first thing you did? I remember hearing you were at NPR, right? And did you pitch the show, or how did it get to be where somebody said, yes, you talk about food and we'll pay you?
Yeah, I mean, well, basically, I was working in radio, mostly news radio, news talk radio. I was kind of coming up through the ranks. And I worked, you know, a combination of coming up at a time when the internet was taking hold and was you know, disrupting everything in the world of media, turning everything upside down. Yep. And there were multiple recessions on top of that. And so there were a lot of jobs being lost. And so I think I went through a period of losing like 6 jobs in 8 years. And after that, I was kind of like, well, this career is not going so well. And around that, friends of mine were starting podcasts, and they were like, you should start a podcast. So I thought, well, if I start my own podcast, at least no one else can cancel the show, like all the other shows I worked on. And so it was soon after the show on NPR that I worked on got canceled that I started my own podcast. And it was a side project for a couple of years. But I hadn't done much in food, but it was based on this idea of like picking a specific food and obsessing about it in ridiculous detail. And I did that for a couple years as a side project. Then I got a book deal, and it became kind of like half a job. And then it took about 4 years before the podcast was at the point where it was able to be a full-time job.
That's fantastic. You know, Dan, you're bringing me back to my days in radio, especially like everything I feel like you went through, I kind of went through as well. Like when the internet blew up, and again, thanks to Al Gore, you know, it was just something along those lines where it was like, okay, you know, this, like everything was like downsizing in print or, you know, in like newspaper, and then obviously radio and all that stuff. So I feel you on that. And it's kind of like you have to like follow where the tech is. And of course it was like, you know, podcast and, you know, web design and all that other stuff, especially, you know, creating your own website and stuff like that. So I feel you. I just have to ask you a question because I'm reading up on your bio. Your podcast is Sporkful. says it isn't for foodies, it is for eaters. Now, the way I take that, and I want to get your insight on that, it's almost like now that the craft beer thing blew up, it's like, oh, I only drink IPAs, or I only drink, porters. I don't drink any lagers now. Like, I feel like people have kind of almost gotten snooty or snotty, whichever you want to say, in regards to that, but like in regards to food. So talk a little bit about, how you differentiate foodies and eaters.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly someone who, like, I love to eat, and I go to a nice restaurant once in a while, but I'm very turned off by the pretentiousness of food. I'm turned off by the pretentiousness of the restaurant scene. I don't care about what the hot new restaurant is. I don't care about chefs or who the chef is. Like there are some chefs who I think are interesting people, but I don't care about, like, the hot new whatever. I think that mostly for a lot of people that's about status. Yeah. It's not even really about the food. Most people who spend a lot of money to go to the hot new place don't even really know what they're eating. I went to one of those places once. I came away being like, nothing I just ate was better than hot dogs. So, and so, like, they had this dish that was like, it was like hand shaved. It was like a pasta made of rye. So it was like a rye bread pasta with, like, shaved pastrami inside. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. And I ate it, and I was like, that was pretty good. But you know what would be better? A pastrami sandwich on rye bread.
Right, actual pastrami.
And a lot of people go to those places so that they can Instagram it, so they can brag about it. It becomes a pissing contest among their friends of who's been to which place. And I just think that whole world is so stupid and I'm so turned off by it. And I also feel like it turns off a lot of people. A lot of people who love to eat have no interest in competing in that stupid pissing contest. And so I wanted to make a show where I could share my love of food and connect with other people who love food and love to eat, but also would be very clear, that we're not trying to be part of that world. And it's, when I tell people that I host a food podcast, that is what they assume. The second I say the word food podcast, they assume, oh, so what's the hot new restaurant? Where should I go to eat? I'm like, I don't know. My kids and I go to Panera. Have you heard of Panera? I need that catchphrase because people make a lot of assumptions about what the show is, what I must be like, or what the show must be about, and I need to try to quickly explain to people that it isn't that. It's something else.
You've gone to Subway and, like, rearranged sandwiches, and one of my favorite things when you talk about unpretentious food is your celebration of comfort foods and, like, your actual joy in looking at a cheeseburger. And I remember somewhere in the book you talk about, and maybe this is such a segue for you to kind of give some knowledge to the listeners, is, like, is the cheese better on top, or should it actually be on the bottom of the cheeseburger where your tongue can, get the flavor before you get to the meat? And when you go through, like, that kind of analysis on celebrating the foods that we actually really want to eat every day, I think, to me, that's one of your differentiators.
Yeah, I mean, that whole that specific technique, stretches back. That's one of my earliest probably things that I was always the kind of person that, even as a kid would be like, what if I eat it like this? Right. And so I remember even like if my parents had company over and there would be like cheese and crackers out, I would put the cheese on the cracker and then flip it upside down, because you put cheese on top of the cracker, you put it in your mouth, and you're like, well, that was pretty good, but I mostly tasted cracker. I thought I was supposed to be tasting cheese, and I thought, well, you taste with your tongue. It turns out it's more complicated than that, but that was my thought process then. Flip it upside down, put it so the cheese lands on your tongue, and that has evolved now into, like, that's why I believe you should put the cheese on the bottom of a cheeseburger. Not only does it bring the cheese closer to your tongue to accentuate cheesy goodness, but also it creates a seal along the bottom that prevents the bottom bun from turning too soggy.
Nice.
So I like that. I'll do like I do a demonstration sometimes, and I do events where I take an Oreo cookie. I have people just folks, you can do this at home. When you get home, get an Oreo. Take one bite of Oreo in standard formation, just like that's what we in science call a control bite, and then after you take that and pay attention to how much frosting you taste, and then open the twist and open and take one of take the blank cookie and put it along the bottom so that you have, like, from top to bottom you have frosting cookie,
right?
And then flip it so that the frosting's on the bottom and take another bite. Now you have the exact same components. You still have two cookies and one layer of frosting. It's the same ratios, but just landing on your tongue in a different order. and it's a massively different experience. And you'll taste a lot more frosting. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm in it for the frosting.
Yeah, that's cheap.
Dan, I feel like I hope you have a clear schedule for the rest of the day, because John and I can talk to you for hours. There's so many things. I'm probably gonna brain dump. One of the things you're talking about that restaurant with the the rye spaghetti or pasta or whatever, thing like that.
Right.
And then you mentioned Oreos. It's like you're got ESP, because you're listening, you're thinking about everything I want to ask you. So you're talking about just give me a pastrami on rye, right? That's what I want. And now Oreo, you see red velvet cupcake Oreo or Belgian waffle Oreo or all these different Oreos. It's like when you see this, all right, I give you an A for effort for trying, and obviously you want to branch out. I get that, but after a while, it's like if I want apple pie, I don't want it in a form of an Oreo. I'll eat an apple pie, right?
Right. No, 100%. It's like sometimes you just want the original thing. Yeah. And it's like, you don't need to reconstitute it. It's like I feel the same way about edibles. So we've covered this on the Sporkful, edible, especially in the places where weed has been legalized, and there's all these high-end food stuff happening where they're putting weed in croissants made by fancy French chefs, and it's what would be better than a croissant filled with weed would be a regular croissant and a joint.
Yeah.
So. I just don't. It's a lot of it is just a gimmick, That being said, there have been some good innovations. Let's not dismiss all the innovations out there.
Doritos Loco Tacos, is that what we're talking about?
Those are good. I mean, I love popcorners are one of my new favorite snacks. Or not so new, but those triangular flat popcorn things that are triangles. Okay. I like the pretzel shells that are pretzel sticks without anything inside.
Okay.
Those are really good.
Pretzel thins are good. Pretzel thins are good, though, right? That's my jam right there.
Look, to my taste, there's too high of a ratio of exterior to interior on those. So you get too much salt in relation to everything else. But I want to be clear. I have a lot of opinions, but in some of these areas, and this is one of them, I like to cite the Latin maxim "de gustibus non est disputandum." In matters of taste, there can be no dispute. And if you like pretzel thins, maybe you like things saltier than I like them, that's not right or wrong. You can like those and enjoy them. I'm not I don't think there's an objective right or wrong with that. That's just what your taste is.
I think Art will appreciate this, because I remember reading and I was flipping through the book, and I think you can explain what it is. And Art, you can ask a question based on what this is. But you have a whole thing on is it called Satvor or Savtor, where it's about the shape of a chicken nugget or a piece of fried chicken, and what the ratio of the surface ratio is to flavor?
Right, yeah. SATVOR is an acronym for surface area to volume ratio, wow. Which I learned about in Mrs. Dahner's AP Bio class. Were you in Mrs. Dahner's AP Bio class, John?
I have her, but now I wish I was.
Okay, well, the one thing I remember from that class is surface area to volume ratio, and I had basically forgotten it, and then it somehow emerged from the recesses of my memory when I was getting into the world of food. I think the second episode of the Sporkful we ever did, which is now coming up on 9 years ago, it was maybe the first or second, was all about ice cubes. And, there are all different shapes of ice cubes, and the shape of your ice cube will determine how quickly it melts in the drink you put your ice into. And this is one thing that you see at fancier places that I will get behind, and that is that the fancy places put thought into the size and shape of their ice cubes. You don't get that TGI Fridays quick melting ice that has a hole bored through the middle of it, so that ice has a very high surface area in relation to volume, and so you have more of the ice coming into contact with the liquid, so it melts very quickly. So, you see the bartender fill the glass to the top with ice, and they start pouring in a little liquor and mixture and whatever, and by the time that you take the first sip, 50% of the drink is water.
Right.
And that's a problem. That's a problem. And so surface area to volume ratio is a huge determining factor. Of course, you guys know that the shape with the lowest surface area to volume ratio is?
Circle?
Very good. It's a sphere. Yes, correct.
Sphere, right.
A sphere. But, so that, or even just a couple of some of the places will do a Rubik's Cube size single ice cube. That's a little bit much. But a couple of big ice cubes with low surface area are going to be a lot better. But it's the same in fried chicken or French fries. Like why are waffle fries crispier? Because they have more surface area. Like, waffle fry is always going to be crispier than a steak fry because it has more surface area in relation to volume. So you have more exterior touching the hot oil, more fried, crispy exterior.
Nice. Just quickly in regards to how you do the Oreo cookie. My wife, I guess, showed me this method when you have a cupcake, right? And especially, maybe your neighbor's mom would make cupcakes. I don't know if you ever did it this way or if she taught you, where you take the bottom part of the cupcake and then you kind of make a cookie out of it where the frosting is the cookie. Now, would you do that? Because that almost defeats the purpose of the Oreo where it's cream, cookie. But have you ever done that where it's like you make like a cupcake sandwich?
Yes. I have done that. It's a great move. I'm married. I was lucky enough to marry a woman who doesn't like frosting. We're kind of like, when it comes to cupcakes, we're kind of like Jack Sprat. Jack Sprat could eat no fat, his wife could eat no lean.
Yeah,
right.
And that's like us with cupcakes. And it's very funny because we have two daughters, and one of them loves frosting, and one of them likes cake. Like one of them will eat around the frosting, and the other one will eat only the frosting. So one of them is me, and one of them is my wife, nice. At least in that respect. And so there's a lot of frosting to go around in my house, And so, yes, sometimes I will just take off the bottom cake, like the bottom half of the cupcake, and give it to my wife, and only eat, because then you're improving your ratios. But if you're not going to do that, to take the bottom half and put it on top to bring the frosting closer to your tongue, definitely a very good move. The other thing that does, and this is an underrated part of that technique, another really pleasurable part of a good cupcake that everyone's just focused on the cake and the frosting, but in a good cupcake, you will also get a little bit of like top perimeter crustiness, a slight crustiness, kind of similar to the muffin top ledge.
Yeah.
And if you eat a cupcake in its normal position, you kind of like, it's hard to really enjoy that because you're kind of opening your mouth really wide and the frosting's on the top. Like the best parts are all, they're just not, you don't get as strong of a perception of that perimeter top crisp. So the sandwichization method also enhances that experience.
This has got to be one of the most relatable interviews we've had with a guest. Because usually for actors or athletes or musicians, I'm like, yeah, I'm not a professional athlete or actor or everything like that. But everything you're saying, man, I'm like, you're preaching to the choir. I love it.
All right, good.
This is great. Go ahead, John.
I wanted to ask you, this is about a recent show you did, because I don't know how I went through my life and never heard of this. And Art and I always talk on the show about making stuff for our kids for dinner that's easy. And I had never heard of, and I probably had never been there, but I'd spent time in Ohio. But you did a show recently on Cincinnati chili.
Yes.
It's basically, you can explain it, but the pictures you had of it on there, it was just a ton of cheese and delicious chili, but it's on spaghetti, and I'd never heard of that. And literally, the next day, I was like, well, my kids like spaghetti, and they don't really know what chili is, but I think this is an easy enough thing to do. But can you because that seems like a great comfort food, easy to make, unless, maybe not at the highest level of these guys. But I had no idea that there were more chili parlors in Cincinnati than there are McDonald's in Cincinnati, and I had no idea about this. So how did you discover it? Have you ever made it yourself?
I've never made it myself. I first heard of Cincinnati chili when I lived in Chicago for a while, and I had some friends who, a buddy of mine there had a brother in Cincinnati, and so I kind of heard about it then, but I had never been to Cincinnati. I had never eaten it. And the truth is, when I first heard about Cincinnati chili, it did not sound promising. Okay. It was described to me as a sweet chili that is made with chocolate and served on top of spaghetti. And I was like, that sounds horrendous. But, I wanted to keep an open mind. And over the years, I had heard, maybe that was a little bit of an overly simplistic description. And I learned, just how important this food is to the city of Cincinnati, the people, it's a city that's had its ups and downs and doesn't, it's not exactly like a major tourist destination. They don't have a ton of things that they can that they can say are unique to Cincinnati that they can have great pride in, and Cincinnati chili is one of them. So I was going to be in that area. So I said we got to do a show about Cincinnati chili, and I went to the oldest chili parlor in Cincinnati, still owned by the original family. It's called Camp Washington Chili. It's been there since 1940. And the chili was fantastic. And I also learned a lot. Like when the food is first described to you, it sounds kind of like this Midwestern casserole slop kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, it's actually a very complex type of chili that has a lot of its roots in the spices that go back to the Mediterranean and the Middle East, like cumin and coriander and cinnamon and cloves, and the idea of putting cinnamon in the chili with these other spices, like it's a very classic kind of Mediterranean preparation, and indeed it was brought to Cincinnati and really invented in America by Greek immigrants. Like really, Cincinnati chili is an immigrant food.
Mm-hmm.
And when they put it on a hot dog, they call it a Coney dog. And Detroit is famous for Coney Island hot dogs, which are a type of chili dog. And those were also brought by Greek immigrants. So it was interesting to me to learn that like this food that on the surface feels like a very sort of white bread Midwestern type of food actually turns out to be an immigrant food. It was that allowed the wave of Greek immigrants that came to America in the late 18 and early 1900s to like really get a foothold in the country.
That's awesome, because when I look at it, like we're always looking for stuff that our kids would like. It sort of combines like some elements of like a sloppy Joe with just general pasta and cheese. And so I was curious how that came about.
For sure, and I should add, just to be clear, like you hear the word chili on spaghetti, and I get that sounds strange, but really this chili is essentially a meat sauce. Like it's not a ton of beans and onions and peppers and chunks of stuff. It's really a type of meat sauce. So to put it on top of spaghetti is once you see it and you eat it, you're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, this makes sense.
Nice.
There you go, Art. You got dinner for tomorrow night.
There you go.
There you go. Sweet. Nice.
The recipe in The Joy of Cooking for Cincinnati chili has been recommended to me by a reliable source. A Cincinnati native says that's the one he uses to make his chili. So I can vouch for that one.
Nice. Man.
You talked about your kids sometimes on social media with the food and things that you go eat. So what do your kids think of, have you tried, I guess the two questions, have you kind of influenced what they like to eat, or do you kind of let them go on their own of what food they should have? And how do you, because kids eat, weird things and they don't have sometimes they eat strange things dipped together. Are you like, if you were a professional athlete and you're watching your kid, mess up the sport that you love, how often do you intervene and say, you're eating it wrong? And you want to jump in, or how often do you let them make their own mistakes?
Well, I mean, really, John, that question gets right to the heart of parenthood, doesn't it? I mean, like that's really one of the hardest things about being a parent is figuring out like when to intervene and try to push your kids in a certain direction and when to leave them alone. I'm pretty hands-off. I try not to. My wife Janie is a little more of a manager. She's always trying to teach a lesson, and in many ways she teaches very valuable lessons that maybe I could learn from too. But so I try not to, I generally don't tell them that they're eating it wrong. I generally let them eat whatever they want. I mean, not whatever they want, but however they want. And they will often, especially my younger daughter Emily, who's 5.5, she'll like dip something in some other thing that's sort of like unconventional, and she'd be like, put this on the Sporkful. You should talk about this on the Sporkful. So they're always pitching me stories, always pitching me segment ideas.
Nice. Well, I told my daughter that fish sticks dipped in milk is eating it wrong, and you should never do it under any circumstances. I took a stand there.
That's suspect. I'll grant you that. I mean, first of all, you're gonna damage the crispiness of the fish stick,
right,
which is that's unfortunate. And then you're probably gonna get floaters in the milk, which is also unfortunate.
Oh, yeah.
If she's gonna do it, I would at least recommend putting like a small bit of milk in a small cup on the side, I call that the sidecar, and let her dip into that and then drink the milk separately. That being said, it's not as crazy as you may say. Like, what's one of the most common things to dip fried fish in? Tartar sauce. And so that's like a creamy mayonnaise-y type of a dip. Granted, maybe it's got a little bit of pickle and some citrus in it, but like it's pretty creamy. And so the idea of putting a fish stick into milk, which is also creamy, like isn't quite as crazy if you think of milk as just being a very bland, watery tartar sauce.
That's true. I hadn't thought of it from that angle. I'm not going to have her listen to this because I don't want her refuting me. But you're right. The milk does have a cousin in the dipping sauce of tartar sauce. Still, there's no cod or haddock milkshakes out there that probably taste too good. So I try to regulate right there.
Way to take a stand, John.
Thank you.
Ketchup was huge in my household, and my wife's was like, you don't do that. And in my early 20s, they took us out to, her parents took us out to like this awesome prime rib joint, and then we all get prime rib. I'm like, yeah, can I get ketchup? They all looked at me, and I'm like, now my kids put ketchup on everything. Not me, not so much, but I'm like, I don't know if it's a Polish thing or a Buffalo, New York thing, but ketchup is like king for my kids right now. So, John, when you mentioned that, I just thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, also, it's just sugar. Ketchup is sweet, so, like, kids are going to like it. It's not the worst thing. I didn't learn to like mustard on my hot dogs till I was about 38. So, I think
yes, nice.
People get too hung up on these things. They get hung up on, like, they want their kids to have the most varied palate when they're, like, 8 years old. It's like, take it easy.
No doubt. Yeah, because I made we had leftovers yesterday, but the 2 days before I made honey mustard chicken, where you take gravy and mustard and honey, kind of mix it up, and then you go with the chicken. And my daughter's like, I was gonna get some ketchup. I'm like, what? Like, there's stuff already on there. You don't need anything. But like you said, to each his own.
Right.
Couple questions on fatherhood, and then we're gonna hit you up with a Life of Dad quick five. Talk about when you found out you're gonna be a dad for the first time. What was going on in your mind, sir?
I mean, it wasn't exactly a shock. It was intentional, and we had been trying for a while, and so it wasn't. So it was like exciting. It's kind of it's. I guess it was kind of like one of those things where when you're looking forward to or expecting something for a really, really long time, and then it actually happens. It's sort of like a shock. So you're like, oh my God, it's actually happening. And then you're like, oh my God, this is actually happening. But then you have to hide the second, oh my God, from your significant other who's like 100%, oh my God, it's actually happening. There's a combination of excitement and fear. Mm-hmm. Nervous sighted, I believe, is the term the kids use. That's what Twilight Sparkle says on My Little Pony. She gets nervous sighted.
Such a dad response right there. Fantastic. Besides, kind of going your own way and loving your own food in your own way and all that good stuff, talk a little bit about some of the other core values you're looking to instill into your kids, you and your wife, as your kids grow up. Kindness
is a really big one. Just trying to get your kids to think about other people, think about how their actions affect other people, think about the people who don't have as much, even if they don't look the same as you. And to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes, which doesn't come naturally to everyone, especially to kids who are sort of by nature selfish. Some adults never outgrow that, but we're hoping our kids will.
Nice. And lastly, for new dads listening to this, what is one big piece of advice you'd offer to them?
A piece of advice that I offer to dads, I think just be there.
Yeah.
Like, be there, like, even if you're stressed and you're busy with work or there's something else to do, it's like, like, it means a lot to your kids when you just show up. Just be at stuff, just be around, and go to their shows in school and like drive. Like, my daughter is in this program now, my older one is in this program now at school, so she has to be driven. She can't take the bus on Friday morning, so she has to go early. So her and her friend go early. So someone has to drive them. So my wife was like, oh, man, like, who's going to drive them? I said, I'll drive them. Like, that'll be fun for me. Like, it's like 8 minutes in the car that I get to hang out with my daughter and her friend. And, so just, even if you feel like you're not 100% there, like, it's important for your kids to feel like you're there.
Yeah, no doubt. I love that. That is totally spot on, and I think John and I will definitely agree with you. Now I got the Life of Dad quick five. Favorite family movie right now in your household is what?
Right now in my household, favorite family movie, I guess I'm going to go with The Sound of Music. We just had my 8-year-old's 8th birthday party. They were supposed to watch a movie. They were going to watch The Sound of Music, but it turns out that's an extremely boring movie. But my daughter loves it, and my kids love it, and my wife loves it, so I love it, I guess. And but we put it on, and the other kids at the party revolted because they have never seen a movie that takes 15 minutes to get to the first piece of dialogue. So we ended up with Hotel Transylvania 3.
They're so similar.
After some tears. Yeah, exactly, right. After some tears. But yeah, I would say Sound of Music right now is the leader.
Awesome. Favorite music or song that's right now in your household? Do you have a favorite song, or is there a band that you can't wait to introduce your kids to?
Can't wait to introduce my kids to, we have fun like making family playlists on Spotify, so everyone will take turns adding a song to the playlist, and then when we're on car trips, we'll just like shuffle the playlist. JoJo Siwa is pretty big right now for us. Meet Me in the Middle, that's still a good one. Cake by the Ocean.
Nice.
We took the kids to see Kidz Bop. We went to the Kidz Bop concert. That was pretty rocking. Nice. We tailgated. It started at 4 p.m. It was perfect. Got to bed at a nice early hour. Fantastic. A couple of beers in the parking lot. Home at 8 o'clock. The best.
Life of Dad right here. Dan is living it. I love it. Describe the perfect family vacation. Where would it be?
The perfect family vacation would be one day at Disney World, followed by one day lying on the beach doing nothing, followed by one day at Disney World, followed by one day lying on the beach doing nothing.
Nice.
They're the relaxing buffer zones you need between the chaos of Disney.
That's right. Actually, maybe I would put one day lying on the beach doing nothing at the beginning. So I want 5 days.
There you go. Nice. Favorite meal to make with your kids is?
I love cooking with my kids. I cook with them all as much as I can. I mean, cookies are fun because they're kind of easy. You know, the kids will like them. And like scrambled eggs. I mean, we like cracking eggs is fun for kids. It makes a mess, but it's fun. And like, that was the first thing I learned to cook. My dad taught me how to make scrambled eggs, so I like teaching my kids how to make scrambled eggs.
Awesome. And lastly, top 3 foods of all time for you are?
I mean, that's a little hard to answer. I would say flour tortillas. And that includes all the different variations of flour tortillas that are included in different cuisines all over the world. Yeah. Anything wrapped in something like a flour tortilla, I love. Beyond that, I don't know that there's one that like. I mean, can I just say cheese? Like sure. Cheese is great. Everyone should be like. I every year on the Sporkful, I make a New Year's food resolution. I pick a food that I'm going to vow to eat more of in the new year. And my New Year's resolution for 2018 was to eat more cheese. So it's been going pretty well.
Awesome, man. Nice.
Do I need a third one? Was that 3?
I felt bad. It was 2, but I felt bad because I was putting you on the spot, and I know it was like, what's the third? But yeah, go ahead with the third.
Well, I don't know. Well, you say of all time, I'll say of right now, lime. I will like squeeze the lime over anything. Like anytime something tastes kind of boring, or like every cocktail, I just like squeeze a ton of lime in there, and it's just so good.
Dan, I feel like you and I could like hang out, man. I put lime, I'm a big whiskey guy, and I put a lime sometimes in there. It's fantastic, man.
Really interesting. Yeah. That's one I have not tried.
Here's a nice drink: a Crown Royal apple, some ginger ale, and a lime and some ice. You're good to go, man.
Wow, I will give that a shot. And I've been doing lime. I do lime in my tequila, lime in my beer, and lime in my chicken soup.
Man, nice. Gotta check that out. Nice.
Yeah, give that a shot.
People, make sure you follow Dan on Twitter at The Sporkful. Of course, check out his podcast, The Sporkful, as well. John and I really enjoyed this conversation, as you can probably tell. But thanks so much for taking the time to chat about fatherhood, food, and continued success with everything you got going in the future, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Cool.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, take care.
Thanks so much for listening to the Life of Dad show. You know where to find us, lifeofdad.com, and on Twitter and Facebook.